the end zone and Jefferson. Touchdown, Minnesota. Here is McCaffrey, right side, breaks the tackle. Good shifty move, gets it. Still going. McCaffrey's going to score. Don't have to necessarily get it all the way into the end zone. Gone for the end zone. It's a touchdown. T.J. Hawkinson. There he goes. Take one. To the end zone. Touchdown, Giants. Let's get it. Step back, throws a fade, back shoulder. Cooper Kupp got it. Cooper Kupp brings it in.
Oh, we could have done with Cooper Kupp last night. Absolutely, we could. Fellas, welcome back. Listeners, viewers, welcome back. Touchdowns for Doe is back again this week. And fellas, it was touchdowns for Doe for us. I don't want to victory lap too much. We've done plenty of that on the social. But it would be remiss of me if I didn't say what a week this show has just had. Jack, Mark. Unbelievable.
Yeah, winners win, baby.
Winners win. Yeah, absolutely they do. Listen, don't want a victory like I said. We've done enough of that on the socials. We've got a packed agenda that we want to go through, so I'm not going to waste any more time on that. Jack, last week you are going to get straight into it. Absolutely no messing. Literally first down, bang, half back up the middle. You went through a really good segment on betting last week, but I know that your DMs and mentions have been lit up by some questions and people saying, oh, is this right? Is this what you look for and stuff? And I know that there's a few things that you want to kind of set the world right on and get off your chest about it.
Yeah, no, firstly, I'm not here to give out picks, so don't ask me in the DM because I'm not going to tell you if I think your pick's good or not because I don't know. I can't predict the future, and if I could, I'd be a millionaire. So yeah, I don't ask me that, please. Like I said with the process last week, I tend to look for running backs when I'm looking for these like larger bets. But also, I don't. This is what I was getting DMs about. I don't look for something to happen in game to get to these bets either. I look beforehand, before the game's even kicked off. So let's go back to last week's example of Tony Jones. I know Jonathan Williams was there, but Jamal Williams, sorry. I know Jamal Williams was there, but he's not going to see 100% of the workload. No running back does. Like you can't run running backs like that anymore in the league. So Tony Jones was the clear-cut number 2, was always going to see work. All right, yeah, I lucked out a bit with Jamal Williams getting injured during the game, but that is not something I was looking at happening. Again, you can't predict the future. You can't predict when someone's going to get injured, so you shouldn't go looking for it. And then I had people asking me about, is this a good bet? Is this a wide receiver? Look, I only really do it for running backs, like I've said. I might do one single anytime on a wide receiver or something like that, but predominantly it's on running backs. So if you missed last week's show, I urge you to go back and listen to it again because we've done a whole, probably about 15-minute segment on it. I don't want to cover over the whole thing again tonight. I just wanted to get it off my chest. Don't come to me for picks because I'm not going to give you picks. And go back and listen to last week's show and just listen to what I said about how I approach it. I'm not. That was the big thing I wanted to get off my chest. I am not looking for something to happen in game, like an injury.
Yeah, Jack. Just on that, on the why you prefer running backs to wide receivers, or why typically you go with running backs when you do this research, and there is research that goes into it. But why is it that you settle on running backs rather than wide receivers. And I know this, but I just want the listeners to kind of know this as well.
It's just purely the fact that when a team gets down to the goal line, the running back is going to see 2 looks at it in general before they throw, unless you're Pete Carroll and do something absolutely stupid in the Super Bowl. But when you've got an all-star running back there, but generally the running back's going to get 2 attempts at it when they get down to the goal line. Wide receivers need, they're competing for most of the time with 3 or 4 other receivers at that one point. So it could go to any one of them 3 or 4. And generally, it's normally it's deep bombs to wide receivers, isn't it? That sees them go in, 30-yard, 40-yard bombs down the field to them that sees them get into the end zone. So I just prefer the running backs. They get more of a look at it to get into the end zone, and that's where I found my most success. Now I have had success with wide receivers in that, but not on doubles. It's been anytime, it's just anytime singles, and they've been odds of like 9-1. I can remember last year I had a Texans tight end who got elevated off the practice squad. And they loved this guy coming out of college. He was one of their rookie picks last year. I can't even remember the guy's name. But he ended up getting in the end zone on the first play. So, that one paid off. That was big odds. It was like 16-1 because I had to request a bet off Sky Bet, and they took the bet, to be fair to them. But that's why just go back and listen to last week's show, because you need to listen to it, I'm not going over it again tonight. You need to listen to the process of how I get to them bets.
It's Jack. It's really simple. People need to understand. You're not predicting the future. It's about the maths of it. If you get offered 125-1, as you did for Tony Jones, and you know full well if you do that bet in that situation and those set of circumstances before the game, 125 times it's going to come in more than once. That's why you're doing it.
Yeah,
exactly. The odds of it are better. If that's a 3-1, you're not betting it. Whether or not you think he's getting 4 or 5 touchdowns, you're not betting it.
And that's the other thing. Like this week, I had a couple of bets. Craig Reynolds, I think, for the Lions, because there was a pathway there to him succeeding before the game. Didn't come off. And then I also had Melvin Gordon for the Ravens. Again, there was a pathway for him to succeed there because Justice Hill was out. I had them at fairly big odds, 90-1 and things like that. They didn't neither come in. But that's how it goes. Sometimes you're not going to win it every week, and I think people just see the big odds, go chasing it. There's just no thought process behind it. You had to have a thought process behind it.
Yeah, spot on. I heard you say about a Houston Texan tight end then elevated, and it gave me flashbacks, Mark, to the athletic body that is Jordan Jenkins.
He's still on the team somewhere. I saw him on the depth chart the other day.
Yeah, but those are the days where the word athletic was our most used word, I think, on a show.
It was full of justification for picking a tight end.
He was 2.7.
Wasn't worst on the slate, but as long as he was athletic.
Yeah. It never worked out, did it?
No, it didn't. But most tight ends don't, so let's not beat ourselves up. Let's talk chalk. I've seen quite a bit on the socials this past week about good chalk, bad chalk. We see it every week from numerous channels, numerous content creators, numerous people, shows, everything. We had a little bit of a back and forth dialogue, and I said we as a show. It was mainly you, Mark, I think, with Kev, good friend of the show. And he was asking about one of the picks that we've been talking about in the show, and something that you had mentioned him as. He was a chalk pick, but as you said, a good chalk pick. What are your thoughts on chalk, Mark?
I mean, you can get a shorter version by just reading that thread with Kevin. Jack was in there for a little bit, and you were as well, Nick. But I personally don't think there's... people seem to judge good and bad chalk, to me, by what the result is. And that's wrong. You should never judge your team by the result. We've discussed this many times. I don't know how many more times I have to tell people about this. It's like, your goal in DFS is to maximise your winnings when you're lucky. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not. There are good and bad lineups, but there's not necessarily good or bad chalk. So But also the chalk, this concept, let's pretend there is a concept of good chalk. Let's pretend there is, okay? It depends on the contest you're in. That was exactly the point we were talking about. We're talking about, was it Joan Ford last week or Josh Kelly? Josh Kelly
Jerome.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was
No,
Josh Kelly
we talked
last
about,
week.
yeah, Josh,
Yeah.
we were talking about Josh Short, and then Jerome Ford came up,
Yeah.
didn't he?
Yeah.
And I said he was a good cash play because he was 50, 60% owned or whatever. But, he wasn't necessarily a good GPP play, I think is what the point we're making, wasn't it? And then we brought up Jerome Ford, didn't you, Jack? I think you brought him up or something like that in that chat.
Yeah.
And I said he could. I said he's a good cash play. I thought, but we did that. That conversation was like a Thursday or something. I think by the end of the week he wasn't actually that highly owned. I don't think.
Yeah.
But
I think people got scared off with the matchup, didn't they, last week?
Yeah, they did.
So.
And we'll come on to that when me and Nick are talking about our lineups from last week. Yeah. We'll come on to that. Yeah, I said at the time, I said I think he's a good cash play. I don't, on his own, as a one-off, he seems like a bad GPP play. However, he could be in a really good lineup. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we do our reviews of our lineups, because I played him and the reasons why and stuff. But yeah, I don't think there's such thing as good or bad chalk, and you can't definitely. I think it was you, Nick, who said in did you say it on there or somewhere or on a WhatsApp? You can't. You're predicting the future if you're calling it a good or bad chalk. It's just chalk.
Yeah. I think my exact words were, there is no good or bad chalk. There is only chalk. Like it's, and I feel like I'm paraphrasing a film there.
I don't know.
Chalk in there instead.
I don't know if you guys feel the same, but do you? I certainly feel like the chalk is hitting a lot more in the NFL that we call the chalk anyway. Like nowadays, rather than like compared to what it has done in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Projection systems have got better. I mean, projections aren't a prediction of the score they're going to have. By the way, they're not a prediction. They're a mean based around a standard deviation and a normal distribution curve, generally speaking. However, they are getting better and more accurate. So the chalk does seem to do better generally. Although this year hasn't been as bad as last year, I don't think, so far.
Well, you had that game week 1, didn't you? So you had the Chargers and the Dolphins in week 1. That was the chalky go-to game, the highest over-under total on the slate. But we reviewed the Millie lineup, and the way the guy got different, because everyone was flocking to Herbert on that build there. But the way the guy got different, he used Tua. And then he done what I do basically in the Millie, just the big heavy stacks, the 2 wide receivers from one side and the wide receiver and the running back from the other side. But he built it a little bit different. Like the Tua was still quite highly owned, but he built a chalky lineup just the other way a little bit.
And the other thing about chalk, Nick, which I think we need to say, because we talked about it a little bit last week as well, is whether you use the chalk or not should depend on the contest size you're in and the type of contest it is. If it's 150 entries and stuff, you need to be more different. You need to be have more variance. You need to be more likely to come last as you are to come first. If you're in a 100-person participation tournament, then you need to think about it slightly differently.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you've both just said. And for me, it comes back to that, like you said, Matt, you can't, if you're calling it good or bad before it's even happened, there are projections out there, but it's too matter of fact for me. I hate matter of fact in DFS because until it happens, you don't know. Whether you perceive it to be good or bad is down to your views, your opinion, your projection. However, until it pans out, you don't know. You could foresee. I don't know if I didn't really check the ownership on Tank Dell this week.
It was about 20. It was over 20s.
It did Tank Dell. Is he considered good or bad chart going into the weekend? After the weekend, it didn't really matter because he smashed, and anyone who had him in the lineup essentially had a free square in the lineup. And at 20%, it's still different enough because the price that you paid for a Tank Dell over the weekend it lets you do different things elsewhere in your lineup. Like you can still get different enough with players like that in your lineup. So for me, you can't definitively say that's good chalk, that's bad chalk. It's just chalk based on ownership until it happens, and depending on how you build the rest of your lineup, it's just chalk. But like I think that is an important message for people, because don't read into chalk as good and bad, and it put you off putting that player in your lineup because they're referred to as good or bad chalk. Until the games all pan out and until your lineup score is posted, that player included, and even if that player doesn't hit, it's still not necessarily a bad play if the rest of your lineup has panned out. Like it's still not bad.
And if it's a cash game that's 70% owned, it's a great play. Doesn't matter what he scores.
All you've done is match 70% of the field. You only need to match 50% to cash.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we mentioned this last week, didn't we? That it's the same as DFS golf. These top players, running backs, wide receivers, or in golf, you get the top golfers. Their ownership, what you generally find, it just condenses between a lot of them. Like say it's 5 or 6 guys, the ownership just condenses. Like you said, you go back to it, the Tank Dell's 20% owned there. Like, but the quarterbacks last week, so Kirk Cousins, Justin Herbert, they all come in round about the same, the 26% ownership mark, something like that. That's what you find. The ownership just condenses itself as you get through to Sunday.
And if you're playing in a hundo, that's 26-30%. It'll be 70% ownership. Which the other thing, just a quick thing about this chalk thing as well. If you look at your lineup in terms of like individual players, good, bad, whatever, however you're doing that, you're not building a lineup. You're building a 9-player accumulator, effectively. And if you're going to build a 9-player accumulator, then you might as well go and bet it. Bet it, win, get banned. In the long.
Don't bet accumulators.
Yeah, exactly. But don't build your lineup as a 9-player accumulator. It's a lineup. Again, me and Nick will probably go into that a bit more detail later on. Because, that Jerome Ford example, he's in my lineup. It's a classic example of everything we're talking about.
I wish he was in my main one. I used Josh Kelly.
We'll segue into the state of Sims, because I know that we did discuss this a little bit last week. Mark, your monologue, I even post the show, I went and had a shower and I watched it back in the shower. Now, it's the first time I've watched you in the shower, Mark, but
that I know of anyway.
Yeah, well, we'll leave that for after the show. But do you know what? Brilliant monologue. And I know that you had some further thoughts on the state of the Sims as well, as did you, Jack, because I know that there's some things that you wanted to mention about some showdowns and things like that.
Yeah, well, I personally think it's killing the big showdown tournaments as such. Because if you looked, I think it was last Thursday's Millie Maker. If you go back and look at that, it was chopped a ridiculous amount of times. I think every person that come first ended up winning $10,000, which is $10,000 is still a lot of money, but that's that tells you how many times it was chopped. Mark's better at maths than me, so Mark can tell you how many lineups that was. And
135, I think it was.
There you go. Well done, Mark. I just
something
think
around there.
So what I've now done with Showdown, because of it, I've noticed it more and more. Every sort of Showdown slate you see now, it gets chopped big time like that, and I've noticed it more and more. So I just focus on double ups and single entry now, going into Showdown contests. That's what I'm going to start doing as of this week. Mainly, I did play double ups last week, coming very handy. But I think the Sims, while they're good products, and I use one though, I use Run the Sims, but I play as a single entry free max guy. I don't use it as a 150 max guy. I can't afford to play that way. But I like what they offer in some aspects, but I do think they are killing certain aspects of Showdown. I don't know what Mark wants to, if he wants to say anything on that, alleviate on that, what I've just said there. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong. In fact, today I was listening to Jordan Cooper's Theory DFS podcast, and he had Nerdy Tenor on it, which I'll just come back to. I'll come back to in a second. And they were talking about showdowns being, and also MMA and potentially golf as well, being kind of broken and solved by sims. But not just the sims that you're talking about, Jack, where they're trying to predict what they do on the field or whatever the sporting arena is. Also, the one contest sims I was talking about last week, where they predict the lineups in all of the contests based on the ownership, and then run them against each other 10,000 times and stuff and see. And they said for Showdown, it could end up killing Showdown. Yeah. But just follow on for that though. That contest sims things last week. Just a quick summary. I was saying that because there's all these contest sims tools come out, that is telling me the most important part of DFS. Something I've known for years, but it's something the most important part is understanding what everybody else is doing in your contest. Okay, and me and Nick are going to talk about that a little bit more when we're talking about our one-on-one battle. Since that happened, since I talked then, they had on LOLs, which is still the best DFS podcast there is, and they had Alex Baker on there, who's awesome-o, stochastic. Many consider the greatest DFS player ever. And he was saying that when Nerdy Tenor said about how he did his process, which was this contest sims thing 2 years ago, he said he basically let the cat out the bag for all the professionals because that's what they'd all been doing. A lot of these professionals don't know anything about what happens on the pitch. So just a quick, it's all very well known that, but how can you use it? Because most of us aren't going to be playing enough volume to justify. Like run the Sims version of the contest sims is $600. Yeah. You have to play a lot of action to justify a $600 tool. And I think the main way is, funny enough, Jack, you were just saying something just before about it, talking about Jefferson and ownership and stuff.
Yeah.
So last week, for example, this is a concept called combinatorial ownership. If Justin Jefferson's going to be 30% owned, you can then assume that Kirk Cousins will be 20% owned, say, okay? And from that, you can also assume that like a player on the opposite side, I don't know, say Keenan Allen in this case, is also going to be, 20-25% owned and stuff, okay? And once you do that, you understand that a lot of lineups are going to be spending a lot of money at wide receiver, a lot of money at quarterback. So then you know that to fill it in, they're probably going to play a cheap, popular player like a Tank Dell, etc. And then that only leaves you 6,000, say, for your running back on average, which means you're probably going to get a Mostert or a Walker or whatever. Okay. So you can know that combination of 5 players is going to be a lot more owned in the same lineups than other combinations of 5 players. Do you see what I mean? Because of the way the money works. Okay. If you have the same 5 players, and those 5 players get the highest scores of the week, you might think to yourself, oh, fantastic, I've got the top 5 players. But if you're in a really big contest, that's the worst thing that can happen to you. Because you might have 5, 10, 15,000 lineups have that combination of 5 players. They've all got this massive top score. To beat them, your other 4 players have got to be almost optimal. Yeah. It's just basic maths, isn't it? It's like a showdowns, the less players, the more optimal you have to be. Whereas if you had a combination of 5 players who say were the top 5 scorers, you might only be going against 200 in one of these big giant tournaments and stuff. With the other 4, it gives you a lot more options to, a lot more ways to beat them and stuff. And as we keep stressing to people, this isn't about cashing money. You need to try and win these contests in DFS. Yeah. So that's the basic combination of combinatorial ownership. Every week there's probably about 7 or 8 players where a ridiculous number of lineups will have 5 of them. And you need to identify them and then work out ways you can get slightly different from it. Because you're just... What Jack said about that showdown. I just said, DFS is all about maximising your winnings when you get lucky. If you're duping 135 times in a milli maker, you're not maximising your winnings when you get lucky. You imagine, how often does somebody win the milli maker? And then you only won £10,000. It's mental. Anyway, so that's it. Just understanding the chalk. Again, this links to what you're just saying. Understand the chalk, how the lineup would be constructed with those chalky players, allows you to do something slightly different and stuff. And I think that's a real practical way you can use it and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm right. I mean, like it's like TED Talks listening to you. Honestly, it's like
Equally, just twice as boring.
this could be behind a paywall next week, and you know what? I might even pay for it myself.
We've got to get the most out of him, Nick, before he goes away again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to take. Yeah.
Ad next week.
Yeah, I have to take weeks off so you get some viewers back. Because they're like, Mark's not on it. There's no more that boring maths talk.
We're probably going to have to write something like that, or even record it, and we'll just play it over the show. And we'll be like, "Yeah, we've got Mark in on the voice call."
Touchdowns for dough, offer great DFS advice and insomnia cures.
You're right though, Mark, because like when we'll look at the lineup in a second, but when you look at that contest, a lot of the lineups that did well had a similar combination of players, but with some subtle differences sprinkled in throughout the lineups.
And do you know why it's in that little contest? Because that's the Ashes one, isn't it? Which had how many people were in it? 180 odd, was it? Or
something like
yeah. Again, it doesn't matter so much with those because you're not having to beat so many people. If you're in like one of the giant 200,000 people contests, it could be 10, 15,000 people.
Yeah.
You know, and milli makers especially.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, the milli maker for the main slate. You know, whatever. Stick your one entry in. Give it a go. You never know.
Yeah,
but
it's a lottery ticket.
Yeah. But for the showdown, I honestly do think the Sims. I think the Sims are killing it.
Yeah,
I agree. And you're not the only one, Jack. As I say, Jordan Cooper and Nerdy Tenor Daniel Hutchings saying exactly that on the pod this week.
What is that pod, Mark?
That's the Theory of DFS. That pod.
DFS.
I will go and give that a listen.
You should listen to it whenever you did your new episode because it's another level, and also they're teaching you this like we're doing here, you know. But these are professionals doing it. They're not giving out picks. Jordan Cooper will never give out picks. He's teaching you how to, you know, and almost everything I'm telling you here is just stuff I got from watching him for years.
Challenging the way of thinking.
Completely.
The way of thinking. Let's have a little look, Mark, because there's been a matchup for the ages this week just gone. So I'm going to paint the picture for the listeners. It's Sunday night. It's 9:00, and the late games are just about to kick off. And me and Mark I think I was third at this point. I think you were first. There was one between us who had no one left to play. So it like with the points difference, bar a disaster, it was going to come down to me or you. And we had offsetting plays in the last game. You had Panthers D, and I had Kenneth Walker, the third. And it went down to the last meaningful Seattle possession. And by meaningful, I mean not the kneel where they're seeing the game out. I'm talking like it's the last series where they're trying to actually put some points on the board. And every point counted at that point. Because every point against came off you. And every yard advantage gained by Seattle was in my favour for Kenneth Walker. I won. You came second. I apologise. It is what it is.
Why would you apologise?
Well, do you know what?
Apologise?
I take it back.
Yeah, take it back. I don't want an apology for that. You just beat me fair and square.
So, do you know what? It was like, and I was absolutely exhausted watching the last hour of Red Zone on Sunday. But I was so gripped at the same time because I just kept refreshing my phone like, oh my God, what is going on in this Seattle game? Let's have a little look at the lineups. And I'm just going to slip it in there as well. I'm off to Wembley this Sunday, and I will be.
You are.
Box. So
be looking down on you, Jack. He will be.
Yeah,
he will be. He will be.
I've gone all Stephen A. Smith. I might fly down in my private jet, and might give the crowd a wave when I get in there. So I listened to your request, Mark. I've put some names on there.
Oh, it's a thing of beauty now.
For you.
Yeah.
But yeah, and do you know what? I even put some offensive linemen in there. I thought, we might as well make.
Oh,
this
is that
as
what those are?
possible? Yeah, that's my
Okay.
little centre guard and tackles.
Why have you got the Jets and the Panthers? Oh, the defense. Sorry, defense. There you go. Sorry, yeah, right, you're right.
Well, last week I had it where it was the offense on one side and then the defense at the top, but obviously we ran out of space. So my lineup at the bottom, your lineup at the top, split literally by 3 points. Talk me through some of your thought process, Mark, behind your lineup when you built it.
I'll just start with the thing which I did wrong, which is bad process. This isn't linked to the result. Even if I'd won, this would have been bad process. As you mentioned, I'd already, before I messaged you, Nick, to ask you who your running back was, which I did about 9 o'clock, I'd already worked out it was either Kenneth Walker, Miles Sanders, and I don't think you could afford Connor. And I thought to myself, well, it's going to be one of those two. I'm just going to leave it. What I should have done, because as you say, every time Walker scores a touchdown, you don't gain 6 points, you gain 9 points. Because, the defense loses 3 points or something, doesn't it? Every time it goes past that 7 points multiplier. So that was just stupid on my part. That was absolutely madness. I should have put in the Cardinals. So that's bad process. It's got nothing to do with coming second. It was just bad process, even if I'd won. And, you still had to come back from quite a fair... I think you were 30 points behind when I went to bed or something. So, anyway... Let's quickly talk about Jerome Ford because he's on there. I was not predicting him to do anything, as nobody was and stuff. However, he was a RB1 with a pretty large touch share in a team, and he was under 5k. And I think he enabled the rest. Him and Tank Dell kind of enabled the rest of the players. So he was what looks like a one-off would be a bad play, but actually he's a good lineup. And then I got lucky because he got 2 touchdowns. Okay. And the other thing I'll just say is the rest of the lineup is all high-powered offenses. So we've got the Chargers and the Vikings we all know about. Houston scoring a lot of points and stuff. And so that's all it was. I mean, the other thing was I knew that, as I've just talked about with the combinatorial ownership stuff, is I knew that Cousins and Jefferson were going to be very highly owned, and probably with the Keenan Allen bring back as you've done. So I just did the other side, and it worked out because Herbert was only 6% owned in that contest, I think.
Yeah,
which is crazy considering the season he's having. But he was more expensive as well, so it made things. So that's all it was. That was the one pivot I made because it's all single entry. You don't have to be too different. I just looked at that game from the other side. Same way as Jack was saying about in week 1, the Millie Maker.
Yep.
I just looked at the other side of that, what was going to be a big total game. Just wanted some Miami. I know Jack and me had Miami everywhere on other lineups and stuff. I certainly did. Yeah, and Houston have been scoring points for fun, so I just wanted them in there. And they were great value, those 2 guys.
Yeah.
That's it. It wasn't that complicated.
Yeah, in fairness, I mean, when I built this, and I know that Jack absolutely wants to rinse me for one thing that I did in my lineup, which was poor process. Go on, Jack.
I'm going to. Is this coming? Nick decided to do the most rookie mistake in DFS ever. He put a 6 p.m. player in his flex spot, and then he also had a 9 p.m. player in the running back spot. I was fuming with him, really. That's very basic, Nick. I expect better of you.
It was poor. In my only defence, this lineup went in at literally about 5:45. It was a very, very busy day. Complete oversight on my behalf. Fortunately, not one that cost me. Because Raheem Mostert basically just... If you didn't own him... you wanted to own, as he wants to now be called, Devon Achan, as opposed to Devon Achane, as people have been calling him. Yeah, you had to own one or the other, it felt like, from that game. And I don't think anyone in that contest will have owned Achan. Absolutely nobody.
They will do this week.
They did in the Millie Maker, I will say. But
that's
the Millie Maker, and then again that goes back to contest selection, like Mark was saying earlier.
I half expected the winning lineup in the Millie Maker to have him, and it didn't. So like it felt like one of them weeks.
Because there
But
wasn't enough people with those lineups that they covered all the other angles as well.
That guy made a lot of money that won the Millie Maker last week.
Yeah,
he did.
yeah.
But like Mostert, I thought Mostert was going to be more owned than he was, but he came in at just over 13%, which I thought was quite low, really. Yeah, I mean the Minnesota and Chargers game. The only reason I went with Cousins and Jefferson, I wanted Jefferson in. The only reason I went with that was just the way I felt the game might have gone. Chargers have been in high scoring games for the first couple of weeks, and I thought Minnesota being at home, Kirk Cousins is playing like Kirk Cousins. He's putting up 25, 30 fantasy points a week. So I thought, do you know what? Yeah, we'll plug him in. Jefferson. Really liked having Keenan Allen in there though as well, because he's seeing so many targets at the moment, but he's scoring as well, and that's a dangerous Keenan Allen when he's scoring touchdowns as well as seeing
he's passing for him as well now.
He's going to see even more this week with Mike Williams. Mike Williams is done for the year.
Yeah, well,
and he got a great matchup as well.
Be like ridiculous ownership this week, but Tank Dell felt like a free square. I actually said on Twitter, I think it was Paul who asked me what some of my thought process was behind that. Quite simple, really. Houston are throwing it a lot. I don't really trust the other receivers, though I was very, very close to putting Robert Woods in, who seems to have a little bit of a career resurgence, but I don't think he was all that good last week in terms of scoring. When I saw Tank Dell's price, I thought, well, you know what? I think he saw 10 targets last week.
It's basically a free square.
Yeah, free square, Stroud, it's a low risk play.
They're scoring points for fun as well. That Houston are scoring points for fun this year. So
yeah, and to be honest, I expected them to play from behind in that game against the Jags. So I thought, well, they're going to be throwing it, the same like they have the first couple of weeks. So minimum targets I'm expecting him to see is a floor of 5-6 targets, maybe with a ceiling of potentially 10 again. Taysom Hill was a bit punty, but I heard Juwan Johnson was maybe out, and Taysom Hill does have them weeks where he hawks touchdowns, and I can't stand playing him. I hate that I put him in my lineup, but there he is, grinning his little head off with 3.1. And the same for Miller.
2 Saints. I mean, God, that was brave.
Well, the Miller pick was again. He was cheap, Miller, and he had a really good write-up going into the season. He was actually nearly 17% owned. No, it wasn't. 8.8%. Looking at the wrong player. This again was a little bit of a pay down. And with Williams injured, I thought Tony Jones probably going to split carries with Miller. If anything, if Miller is, and he practiced full all week without any limitations, could he potentially get the lion's share, being maybe the more elusive back of the two? That didn't pan out, but then the Kenneth Walker pick did pan out. And it panned out in my favour, Mark, because like you said, you left the Panthers D in there. Yeah. And I think it got to half time, and I think Walker was on like 6 points, 7 points. And I was like, this is done. But yeah,
it was a great pick. We go back to last week when I was saying about the Panthers. How many rushing touchdowns have they given up this year already to rush like running backs? And that's all he is. Like he's not very efficient. You just need him to get in the box, really. Kenneth Walker.
My best GPP lineup, which scored 229 points, that was a Seattle Walker, Metcalf, Geno Smith.
Yeah.
My highest scoring lineup is very similar to both of yours, really. I just got Josh Kelly in there, and I ate some chalk on Travis Etienne, which was fine. He done okay. I also ate the chalk at tight end on Dyron Smith, the Dolphins tight end, who didn't really come through, but I had the Bills defense, luckily.
Yeah. Well, Bills D, I guess at 2,900 is technically a pay down defense when you look at some of the pricing. If you weren't playing that, then you'd have been quite happy with the Texans at 2.5.
I think Washington was the other popular one for some reason at 2,400. Didn't really get that, but
That was just
No.
a money-saving thing, I think.
Yeah,
Because they also get a lot of sacks, generally, a lot of decent, D-line and stuff.
yeah.
Well,
It didn't work out against Josh Allen. Looked like the best he'd played in years. It's like,
we've both paid down really there at DMARC with Carolina and the Jets, but like the Jets scored 4. Beneath them was the Seahawks, Falcons, Vikings, Broncos, Cowboys, Commanders, Panthers, Bears, Jags. It just shows why we do that, why we pay down at D. And then above that, Arizona was 2,300. They scored 5. Titans scored 5. Packers scored 5. Like the Bills D was such a good play. Lions, Texans, Browns, you'd have probably been happy with them. They were reasonably priced, but that's exactly why we pay down at D every week.
Both these lineups here are a prime example why you pay down at that position and you just don't care about it.
Absolutely. And at tight end, in fairness, as well, like Hawkinson, that's not a bad score, Mark, 14.8. But again, the tight ends just weren't good again. Really,
that was just me trying to have a unique stack of that game in that particular contest.
Yeah.
You know?
And absolute fair play. And I think Hawkinson, if I was playing a tight end, he probably would be one of the ones where you can sort of plant your flag because he does see targets in this offense. He didn't always at the Lions. He was patchier there, but he hits in the Vikings.
That's what I mentioned that in the newsletter actually, Mark, with the Hawkinson stack on the bring back. I said that the Cousins side was my favourite stack of the week, and I said, but if you want to get different within this game, you stack him with Hawkinson, and it was fine anyway. He still come through there really at that price.
The other reason I liked the Herbert side was because Herbert was a lot more expensive than Cousins. He was like 1,300 more or something. And I think that's another reason why people wouldn't play him. So again, that's another reason why I just went from that side.
Yeah.
And it really is as simple as that one little thing, thinking about your lineup like that and then starting. The rest of it was just picking, the same reasons as everybody else does it the same way. Just wanted access to lots of points, If I could have got more Miami players in, I would have done. But, there was no way. I didn't really want, I wanted Hawkinson there, not Smythe and stuff. So, yeah, there's no way to get a cheap, real, a really good cheap Miami player in it. And this week it's going to be even harder because they're all priced up so high.
Yeah. The Millie winner. Players that he shared similar to us. Kenneth Walker, he had in at 20% ownership in the Millie. Mostert at 16%. Keenan Allen, 15.7%. Tank Dell, 20.6%. He had the Bills D in, Jack. Where he got a bit different. He had Laporta from the Lions in at tight end, 9.3. He had Adam Thielen in 11% in the flex. So one of the late players in the flex there, which is where I went wrong. He had Tyreek Hill in 22.8%, understandably. Jared Goff at quarterback, 3.7%. Jared Goff was actually the only player in his lineup where he wasn't putting out forest fires. Everyone else absolutely hot. And in fairness, Jared Goff scoring 19 points. You probably take that most weeks if you're going to play him.
That was a stack I got onto actually. Within my free max, that was one of the stack I got onto the Jared Goff stack. But didn't quite come through.
There were so many low scoring stacks this week.
Yeah,
the week before everybody, because all the games went over their totals and stuff. There was lots of points around, but this week there was so low, like that Atlanta, Detroit, and stuff. There was so many low. Yeah, that's an example. There was loads. Baltimore, Indy, it was quite hard. Other than Lamar Jackson, I think.
I know we both loved that Dolphins game, didn't we? Anyway, last weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't expect them to go nuclear like that, but
no, that was an example of luck, though. That was just an example of DFS luck that they got so much. But you put yourself in a position to when these things happen, and Miami can score 70 points. Indy can't score 70 points. Yeah, for example.
And I put a little snippet in the newsletter on the Stacks newsletter on Sunday about Tua. So you go back and read that. There was a little snippet in there about how many times he's appeared on the Millie Maker.
Yeah.
I like that stat.
I think it'd be EV if you just played Tua stacks every time the Millie Maker he was on it.
Well, especially now, especially with Waddle out, it's such a condensed player pool really there. You've got the running backs and Tyreek Hill. And if you want to just throw matchups out the window, look what Tyreek Hill done against the Broncos. That when he's getting covered by Satan pretty much the whole game. He absolutely nuked them.
This is, I've just had a look at the perfect lineup, and he had 7 out of 9 in the perfect lineup.
That is impressive.
You're not beating that man this week, because the ones that you didn't have were Achan and Herbert. Now, you might have had Herbert in that lineup, but I don't think he would have been able to build that lineup by putting Herbert in it, because he'd have probably been priced out of that lineup. So
yeah,
it's
Well, he put a train in, didn't he? So he come 1 and 2. Well, joint first in the Millie Maker. Didn't he come 3rd and then come 7th or something like that as well? So he won a lot of money.
So, if he was to have Herbert in, he'd have had to have put someone like Achan in or whoever. He wouldn't have been able to afford Walker. But, it's just absolutely bonkers. You very rarely see 2 running backs from the same team both in the perfect lineup, let alone the 2 running backs totaling 100 points nigh on between them. It's absolutely bonkers. But
not only that, the wide receivers score points as well, and the quarterback got points.
And there was no Waddle. There was no Jalen Waddle. Absolutely madness. But do you know what? That's week 3, and it's in the books. And once again, fellas, I've enjoyed this. On to week 4. Mark, you're not going to be with us next week, are you? You're going to be in Italy.
Indeed. So yeah, I'll give you all a break. Allow Jack to get a word in, and I'll be watching now. I'm pretty sure I'll be watching.
Cool.
So I can just do abuse from the comment section.
You're back in week 5?
Yeah, I'm back. I think I'm back then for the rest of the season without a problem.
We'll class it as your bye week then, this one.
I've had so many.
He's been on the injured reserve and now he's in a bye week.
Hey, Nick, I can't believe already this far into the season your attendance record is better than mine.
I'm even surprising myself, to be honest. But here we go. The fact that Jack used his favourite little video on you rather than me for a change in the chat is it made my day. A blast as always, fellas. Enjoy the action this week. I know I will, from my corporate box at Wembley. And good luck in week 4. We will see you next Tuesday.
Peace out.